The story starts in Pennsylvania, way back in 1922. We meet a young girl named Rose who is sitting with her grandfather named Silas. Silas scoops a handful of dirt and puts it on the table. As the little girl is feeling it in her hands, he tries to tell her an important lesson. He says that if you want to understand nature, you have to treat it with respect. That dirt, he says, has stories to whisper if you listen closely. He says that his father taught him these lessons about the world around them, and now he wants to pass on this knowledge to her. Then, her grandpa takes off the necklace from around his neck and gives it to Rose. The necklace looks old and has intricate detailing that resembles a tree on it. He tells her it was passed down from his own father. This necklace, he explains, is like a shield that keeps good things in and bad things out. When Rose asks if it does something, he tells her that he saw it protect his dad from harm once. Meanwhile, downstairs, Rose's father is busy trying to fix some wooden structure, while her mother is preparing supper. She also comes down to help her mother, who tells her that they have to keep it positive today. As the preparations for the meal are done, her mother calls out to her father to come in to eat. The man, who is still unable to find the structure outside, breaks it with the hammer. Annoyed, he comes in and throws the hammer on the table in front of him. This startles the whole family who is sitting around the table together. However, William, Rose's father, does not excuse his violent behavior. Just then, to diffuse the tension, her mom comes and tries to tell her dad that they promised not to bring any tools on the dinner table. Yet the man remains quiet, not even bothering to reply. Sighing, her mom tells her children to calm down and asks Rose to say grace. At the table, there is Rose, her mom, dad, brother, and a sister. After saying grace, the family, sitting around the table, begin eating dinner. But something seems off with William. He acts weird and keeps seeing strange bloody scenes in his head, like something from a war. This makes him extremely irritable, and after enduring for a while, he begins cutting the veggies on his plate, but his hands tremble. After a while, his trembling turns to full-on violence, and he turns the plate over. His wife, although scared, tries to calm him down, but to no avail. He shouts at her not to touch him, and after screaming about letting him bleed out, he abruptly gets up and leaves the table. The little kids are scared and confused. They ask their mom what's wrong with dad, but she just says he's not feeling well. Later, we see the family turning in for the night. William puts the hammer and his medals from the army on his bedside table. It seems he served in the army for quite some time. On the other side, we see Rose. Her siblings have already gone to bed while she follows suit after praying to the Lord. After some time, in the middle of the night, a strange noise wakes William up. He grabs a hammer from beside his bed and creeps out of the room. Moments later, his wife wakes up and looks around for him. She cannot spot him on the bed and looks to the side to find him hovering over her. Instead of checking on the noise, William uses the hammer to hurt his wife. On the other side, Rose wakes up with a jolt. She hears strange noises coming from outside and ventures out to check. Unbeknownst to her, her father is attacking her with the same hammer. A terrified Rose quickly goes outside and hides behind a tree. Meanwhile, as William comes into her room to take her out, he finds the room empty. Going outside, William begins shouting for someone named Hank. He keeps saying that he is ready to free him. Hearing her father call out, Rose comes out from hiding and faces him. Seeing her, the man mistakes her for someone named Hank. When he approaches her, calling her Hank and promising to set him free, Rose shouts that she's not Hank. Just in the nick of time, her grandpa appears and warns Rose to run away. But it's too late for him. William angrily turns to the old man and glares at him. In a frenzied rage, he takes out the old man and then gets shot by someone else. The next day, the police arrive to investigate the terrible scene. Two officers are talking among themselves. One of them is named Serge, who says that he used to drive William home drunk after the war. Serge tells the officer that William used to tell him how he kept seeing scary things, but he always blamed it on the whiskey. The officer then reveals the sad news that William's wife and all the kids are gone too, except for the oldest one. Serge is horrified to hear this and immediately asks the officer to go together and find the missing child. After a while of searching, they find Rose hiding alone in the woods. Serge asks her if she has any other family left, and Rose shakes her head with a heavy heart. Serge then tells her about a special place a few states away, where he used to live as a kid. He promises her that if she goes there, she'll be safe and looked after. Rose looks him in the eye, and in a pleading tone asks if there would not be any war there. Serge's heart aches for the poor child, and he promises that there wouldn't be anything like that. The story then cuts to a scene inside a church. A priest named Father Henry is praying when another priest approaches him. The man tells Father Henry that a girl was brought to a place called St. John's that morning after losing her family. and he thinks Father Henry should check on her. Father Henry tells him that it is not unusual for such children to come there, but he insists, saying that the circumstances are quite unusual. Father Henry assures him that he'll be in touch with the Reverend Mother since he knows her well. Rose travels all the way to a convent. The car stops near the door, and she gets out to go inside. There, a kind woman named Reverend Mother Agnes greets her and welcomes her to stay there. The movie then jumps ahead 10 years. Rose is all grown up now. She goes to the church, and there she visits the confessions chamber where she talks to a priest named Father Theodore. Rose tells him that she can't stop thinking about her dad, even after all this time. Despite the hurt and heartache that it brings her, she is unable to stop. The father asks her that there must be something else in her childhood apart from his father's illness that she could distract her mind with. Hearing this, Rose corrects him, saying that it wasn't an illness, but rather dreams, according to Mother Reverend. Then, Father Theodore asks her about becoming a full-fledged nun, but Rose says she feels that she could do more. She feels like she could be helping people more out in the world. However, Father Theodore doesn't quite approve of her such thinking. He says that in order to help others, she first needs to find peace within herself. Rose then meets up with Sister Ella, who's been a nun for 8 years now. She asks why Ella was absent from prayers today, and the woman replies after a deep breath. She says that after much contemplation, she thinks she is now ready to take her final vows, which means becoming a nun forever. Rose is a bit shocked, and she voices her shock, asking if she really is ready. Sister Ella looks at her and reminds her that it is not a quick decision. After all, she has been a nun for almost 8 years. Afterwards, the two go and settle down at the dinner table, where soon the other nuns arrive for supper too. Before they begin, Father Theodore arrives along with a worker at the convent named Jeremiah. They say grace, and all settle down to eat. Jeremiah comes to sit beside Rose, who gives him a meaningful glance. Later that night, Rose is busy washing clothes in the washroom. As the wind blows outside, she hears a strange voice. It spooks her a little, so she quickly takes out the special locket her grandpa gave her. Looking around scared, she tries to calm her nerves by saying prayers, but the noise doesn't stop. Just then, she hears a whisper calling her name. The terrifying voice warns her, saying it has come for her. Quickly turning around, she rushes out of there and goes back to her room. There, she continues to say her prayers when the Reverend Mother Agnes comes to check on her. The mother asks if everything is all right, and Rose pretends that it is, but she cannot fool the woman who has cared for her like family. She insists, asking if the nightmares have returned. Scared, Rose quickly replies that she is not her father. The kind Reverend Mother tells Rose that they took her in as family when she first arrived. But Reverend Mother also knows that Rose keeps some things bottled up inside, things she doesn't want to share with anyone. The old woman understands that Rose lost her real family, but assures her that God and the convent are her family now. She should not be so scared of being alone, because she is never alone, and the Lord is always with her. After assuring her and showering her with love, the Reverend Mother tells Rose to get some rest. That night, as Rose sleeps, she's plagued by terrible nightmares. We see strange things happening, hinting that something evil might be taking hold of her. Suddenly, a dark figure bursts out of her mouth. The next day, Rose wakes up to find herself very disoriented and cold. She takes her journal, and after getting a little free time from the chores, draws and writes down her thoughts. It seems that in her chaotic life, the only thing that brings her a little peace is writing. It is what saves her from going mad. Later, while having lunch, she has a little tense conversation with Jeremiah. When she comes to sit down at the table, Sister Lilith asks what he said, and she lies, saying that they talked about traveling. Soon their conversation turns to their lives before coming to the convent. When Rose asks Ella about her life before the convent, she gets strangely upset. She and Sister Lilith tell her that since they have made peace with their pasts, unlike her, they no longer feel doubtful about saying their final vows. This upsets poor Rose, who asks them not to be so condescending. However, Ella says that they are only trying to look out for her, and should she need it, they would always be there for her. After lunch, Rose returns to the confessional booth, feeling very alone. She tells Father Theodore about her loneliness. When he asks about her last night at home, all she can remember is the pain in her father's eyes, and the chilling words he kept saying again and again, to take his life. Even though her world crumbled around her, Rose felt a steady beat inside, almost like a clock ticking. It was a strange calmness amidst the chaos. Back in the confessional, Father Theodore tells Rose he sensed her guilt ever since she came to the convent. But instead of fading with time, it's gotten stronger. He explains that these overwhelming emotions are a test, meant to make her faith even more powerful. Thus, she should trust in the Lord and overcome all these. After getting out of the confessional, Rose rushes to Sister Ella and Sister Lily. She asks them if they've noticed anything unusual lately or anything out of the ordinary. They look at her with concern and assure her that everything seems perfectly normal. Sister Ella suggests seeing the doctor if Rose isn't feeling well. Seeking guidance again, Rose returns to the confessional booth. This time, however, when she starts confessing about seeing and hearing things that aren't real, there's no answer from the other side. After calling twice, she looks through the window and finds no Father Theodore there. She could have sworn he was just there a moment ago. Confused and a little scared, Rose steps out of the booth and starts searching for the priest. Outside, she bumps into Jeremiah, who tells her Father Theodore is busy preparing a sermon for the midnight mass. Rose insists she just saw him in the church, but Jeremiah informs her he's been there for over an hour and the confessional booth was empty, except for her when he arrived. Shaken, Rose asks Jeremiah if he overheard her confession. He admits he tried to ignore it, but promises he won't breathe a word of it to anyone. Jeremiah asks Rose if she has figured out whether the weird stuff is happening because of the convent itself, or if it's following her around. After fumbling a bit, Rose finally admits that it seems to be connected to her. Jeremiah wonders if this is the reason why she hasn't yet taken her vows, and she affirms. She says that it is her father. Jeremiah, however, offers another scary possibility. Maybe the thing that was inside her father somehow got reborn inside her. After hearing this, Rose leaves. Back in her room, Rose is tormented by voices again. She sees a creepy black hand reaching out towards her. The ticking of the clock grows louder and more frantic. As she turns around, she sees the black hand right behind her, but then it vanishes. A voice hisses in her ear, urging her to assassinate. That night, Rose has a terrifying dream. She sees herself possessed by a demon, with Father Theodore desperately trying to perform an exorcism to free her. She jolts awake with a scream. Days go by and Rose's condition worsens day by day. She draws on her journal cheerfully during the day and horrifyingly at night. Her visions keep getting more and more twisted. Sister Ella notices her absence and genuinely feels worried for her. The next day, during choir practice, Rose's mind is far away, haunted by the visions and voices. Suddenly, she lets out a blood-curdling scream, sending chills down the spines of the other sisters. Rose apologizes to Reverend Mother and flees the room. In a horrifying twist, we see the crucifix hanging on the walls flipped upside down, a symbol of evil's presence. As Rose is fleeing to her room, she bumps into Father Theodore, who informs Rose that Reverend Mother is looking for her. But Rose can only manage to say she's not feeling well, her voice trembling with fear. Father tells Rose to rest, but a terrifying sight on the wall behind him sends her running in fear. That night, Rose has the same horrifying dream again. She's being possessed and someone is restraining her. As she screams in the dream world, Jeremiah seems to notice it too. He sees the inverted cross on the walls of the church. Rose screams out loud in her sleep, and Jeremiah can only clutch his rosary and pray for her. Thankfully, after a moment, Rose seems to return to normal. The strange happenings around Rose worry Reverend Mother. She goes to discuss with Father about the situation and asks about their conversation, but he reminds her that the details of confessions are meant to be kept secret. Reverend Mother expresses her concern for Rose, sensing something deeper than just a troubled past. She suggests calling in Father Henry, a specialist who might be able to help Rose. Father pushes back, insisting it's just childhood. But Reverend Mother isn't convinced. There's something more going on, and she would like to help her before it gets too late. The next morning, the convent holds a ceremony for Sister Ella, who is taking her final vows. But the peaceful event is shattered when Rose disrupts everything. She gets up from her seat and walks towards Sister Ella. Just as Rose reaches her friend, she makes a cross-shaped mark on Sister Ella's forehead. With that touch, a dark presence seems to take hold of Ella as her eyes turn dark, and the scene abruptly cuts off. Rose has another terrible night, plagued by the same nightmare of demonic possession. In the dream, she sees the church battling to expel the evil from her. As she wakes up with a jolt, we see horrifying burn marks on her body in the shape of hands. The next morning, the seriousness of the situation becomes clear. Reverend Mother calls upon Father Henry, a specialist who can hopefully help. She explains that they desperately need his assistance. Showing him a twisted, bent cross, she reveals that she's found similar ones scattered throughout the convent, in Rose's room, the hallway, and even other rooms. Father Henry is shaken. He's encountered strange things before, like crosses flying or being turned upside down. But these bent crosses are unlike anything he's ever seen. Reverend Mother then fills him in on Rose's strange behavior. Father Henry, eager to understand what's happening, insists on meeting Rose as soon as possible. Meanwhile, The scene cuts to Rose sitting inside the confessional booth. She confesses to Father Theodore that she hasn't been completely honest with him in the past. Rose confesses, while crying, that she's been having strange visions, like memories that don't belong to her. It's as if they should be hers, but they haven't happened. The father tries to calm her down by saying that in such times, she should focus on her breathing and her heartbeat. It is the lead that connects her to God. She hears it and remembers the strange constant rhythmic sound, like a clock ticking. Suddenly, a drop of water falls on her head. As she describes more visions, Father Theodore reveals a shocking connection. He tells her that when he was younger, a boy named Christopher came to him with very similar experiences. Fear grips Rose as she tries to open the confessional booth door, but it's locked. To make matters worse, the booth starts filling with water. Father Theodore continues, explaining that Christopher became violent and destructive. They had to call in a specialist, Father Henry, to perform an exorcism to rid Christopher of the evil. Rose screams for help, but Father Theodore seems oblivious. He speaks of a rebirth, his words taking on a dark and ominous tone. Suddenly, Rose snaps. Overcome by a terrifying force, she attacks Father Theodore and takes him out. Gasping, Rose wakes up to find herself back in the confessional booth. Scared, she quickly looks through the window to find Father Theodore's lifeless body. Horrified by what she's done, she flees the scene. Moments later, Jeremiah finds Rose clutching her locket and some soil. He misinterprets the scene, thinking it's some kind of pagan ritual or witchcraft. Rose begs him to keep this quiet. He reveals that Reverend Mother is worried about her and has called in a specialist to see her. Meanwhile, Sister Ella and Sister Lily are worried for Rose and go looking for her in the confessional booth. Much to their horror, they stumble upon the horrifying scene of Father Theodore's lifeless body. A wave of shock and fear washes over them. Sister Lily whispers the unthinkable. Could Rose have done this? The news reaches Reverend Mother, who rushes to the scene and demands to know who was with Father Theodore last. Sister Ella, still shaken, stammers that she thinks it was Rose. Reverend Mother, her face etched with worry, instructs them to leave the convent at once and seek refuge at St. Jude's. Rose, meanwhile, is having a conversation with Jeremiah. She confesses to feeling an intense burning sensation, a feeling that compels her to see the specialist everyone keeps mentioning. Jeremiah assures her the specialist is aware of her situation, having known about her since she arrived at the convent all those years ago. Rose is confused. Why the extra attention? Jeremiah explains it's a precaution. He then delves deeper, asking Rose if she's experienced any strange signs. Unseen voices whispering in her ear, a feeling of slipping in and out of reality, and most importantly, a spiritual virginity. He points out that despite being raised in the convent, she hasn't taken her final vows, a detail that seems significant. Jeremiah believes whatever is sharing her body is holding her back from taking her vows, perhaps her lack of full commitment to the faith. All of a sudden, he begins shouting at her. He says that she isn't a true Lamb of God, and that she believes in pagan beliefs. Rose pleads with Jeremiah to stop whatever he's doing, but he insists that he's trying to help her soul. Just then, two men arrive with Father Henry and whisk Rose away. The scene cuts to a dark room, where Rose finds herself bound to a bed, a scene that is eerily similar to her nightmares. Two sisters stand vigil beside her, praying softly. Disoriented and scared, Rose demands to know where she is. They assure her she's been there for many years, a detail that confuses Rose greatly. She asks about Reverend Mother, but Jeremiah delivers a shocking blow. Reverend Mother is no more. Father Henry is the one who is performing the exorcism. He urges Rose to fight whatever is possessing her, but Rose's mind is elsewhere. She asks about a book she has, a book where she supposedly drew a picture of the animals and peaceful, happy moments. Jeremiah retrieves the book, but to Rose's horror, it doesn't show anything peaceful. It depicts a terrifying image of the devil. Jeremiah explains the blood-curdling truth. Rose has been here since her family's tragic demise. With that revelation hanging heavy in the air, Father Henry begins the exorcism rite. Rose screams in a mixture of fear and pain as Father Henry sprinkles her with holy water blessed by the Vatican, a desperate attempt to rid her of the evil presence. In a desperate plea, Rose cries out that there's something inside her. In a shocking twist, she sees a vision of her father William. He apologizes for not being there to watch her grow up, blaming his own pain for letting darkness consume him. He urges Rose to fight the evil possessing her and to not let it win. The scene snaps back to the room, and a monstrous strength surges through Rose. She overpowers the sisters restraining her, flinging them aside with inhuman force. Father Henry tries to intervene, but Rose's rage is unstoppable. In a horrifying moment, she takes out Father Henry too. Jeremiah, the only one left, cautiously approaches Rose, dangling her locket. Betrayal flashes in Rose's eyes. She screams that she trusted him. Jeremiah's facade crumbles, revealing a sinister glint in his eyes. He declares he's not who she thinks he is. In a cruel twist, he uses the locket, now burning hot, to brand Rose's face. Enraged and in pain, Rose overpowers Jeremiah, throwing him out the window while saying that inner peace is the fiercest fire of them all. With a final, desperate act, Rose sets fire to the room by the flames. The film ends with a chilling image. Jeremiah, seemingly unharmed, boards a train, disappearing into the distance.